Hello everybody and welcome back. So today we are starting a new set of notes. We're looking at our free market capitalist system here. Alright, so the past couple of days we've been talking about the traditional economies and command economies. Traditional economies, again, focusing most on habits, customs, and beliefs. Think about that Wadabe tribe, right? They're not as focused on newer inventions, economic innovations, economic growth. They want to focus on their customs and beliefs, right? Their way of living that they've had for generations. All right, the command economy, again, is one controlled by the government, right? So think about China or North Korea or Cuba, where the government sets the agenda of what's produced and how it's produced. Well, here we're going to look more specifically at our free market economy, what makes it tick, and what's necessary for it to function well. All right, so the key thing here is that whereas for a command economy, the government decides what's produced, for the free market economy, it's an agreement between the producers and consumers and what they want. All right, and so it's always going to be a balancing act, right? Consumers or producers, the ones who make goods, businesses, are going to want a high price for the good, but if the price is too high, people won't buy it. Consumers want it as low of a price as possible, but if the price is too low, businesses don't make a profit off of it. So they meet where we call the equilibrium price, where buyers and sellers are both happy for a product. All right, a couple other things needed for a free market economy to work first off, sorry, not for it to work, but this is kind of more of the result, is this increase in productivity and efficiency. So if you think about businesses that are in competition, they're always trying to one-up one another. So if you think about Chick-fil-A, right, their biggest downside is that they're always busy, that their line is always super long. And so they've tried a couple different things to reduce the amount of time that you're waiting on them. Whether it's the phone app that you can put in your order, whether it's the teenagers that come out and take your order and all that heat. All right, they're all designed at making this business more productive. Same thing with like the self-checkout lines at Walmart, right? They're trying to one-up their competition by making it more efficient. Right? Secondly, our free market economy allows for a high degree of specialization. What I mean by that is people get good at very, very specific things. So if you think about Brunswick High School versus other schools as a good example, so since Brunswick High is so large, we have a lot of teachers. All right, and so I'm able to specialize in economics all day long. That's all I teach all day long. And so because of that, 100% of my planning period goes towards economics. A close friend of mine, on the other hand, teaches at a private school, and she teaches math, science, and Spanish. All right, and so I can't imagine what her planning looks like as she tries to juggle all of these different classes. Because I'm able to specialize, I can get better and better at what I do. Same thing for a chef or a car salesman, right? By focusing in on one task, they get really good at it. Whereas with that Wadabe tribe, they have to hunt for their food, they have to go get their own water, they have to build their own shelter, and so chances are they're not able to do each of these things as well as somebody who focuses on just one of them. All right, and finally, this specialization allows us to divide up labor, right? And giving everybody tasks that they're specifically good at, that way they can improve upon themselves even more. All right, so let's talk about some rights that are needed for our economy to work. So a big one is legal equality, right? If you look at the civil rights movement, a big part of it was voter rights and things like that, but another big part was rights in the workplace. All right, if minorities and discriminated groups don't have the right, their rights in court to live where they want to live or work where they want to work without facing discrimination, then there's never going to be equality. So they have to have this legal equality to make that work. All right, same thing with private property rights. If you look at, it's what we call redlining. In bigger cities back in the 70s, 80s, and even before then, minorities weren't able to get loans for houses in certain areas. And so that's why, especially in cities like Atlanta, you still see a really high degree of racial segregation because they didn't have these private property rights. Now, of course, all of these things are illegal now, and slowly these issues are starting to address themselves. All right, but we have to have this ability to say that this property is ours, this house is ours. That way, we can invest in these things. And so we'll talk more about the private property rights in just a second and how they encourage growth. All right, we have to be able to make contracts with one another that are binding. So if you're looking at me building a house for somebody else, right, I'm going to require this contract because I don't want to build the house for them and then end up not getting paid. Same thing in reverse. If I buy a house from somebody, I don't want to write out this contract. That way, if my roof caves in, I've got somebody to sue and get my money back from. The good thing about this is that either way, the government is going to back up this contract. The government's going to support this contract because it provides trust with one another. All right, like we talked about before, there's got to be voluntary exchange, meaning that whenever people trade with one another, all right, they're both in it for the same reasons, right? The buyer's trying to get their product at a low price, the seller's trying to sell at a high price, and as long as there's not any fraudulent activity, both parties are going to win. All right, and the final thing that we need within our economy is a degree of competition. So if there's not competition, then we get businesses like Daraprim or EpiPen, where the prices can just get out of control. And so the government tries to encourage this competition, but where competition doesn't exist, they try to bring in regulation. Like with Georgia Power, we don't really need 2 electric companies, all right, but if there's only going to be one, then the state of Georgia is going to tell that company what they can and can't charge for electricity. That way they don't take advantage of people. All right, so we're going to watch a short video now looking specifically at private property rights, specifically intellectual property. Sorry, one moment. All right, maybe we won't. I'll post the video for you guys to watch in just a second. Oh, here we go.
This is the song that Donna Evole composed by Giuseppe Verdi for his opera Rigoletto. I'm sure you all recognize it. Back in the 19th century, Giuseppe Verdi knew he was onto a winner, so he actually kept the entire score secret and didn't even show it to the lead tenor until 2 days before the first performance of the opera. And he was right to do this, because within a week of the first performance, the sheet music was being widely sold and transcribed, and many people were putting on performances of this song, which has now gone into the popular lexicon and is widely used by, for example, soccer fans around the world. What we have here is an argument about intellectual property. And the reason why it's a complicated argument is because there are 3 quite distinct and different ways of understanding what intellectual property is. If we think that intellectual property is like any other kind of property, then it must be, like other kinds of property, perpetual. That would mean in this case that Verdi's estate could still own the rights to the song. And this would mean that if, for example, as a soccer fan, you chanted a chant which used the tune from this famous song, you would be violating the intellectual property of Verdi's estate, and you would be subject to penalties. It would mean that any time anybody anywhere wanted to use the music or to perform the song, they would have to pay a royalty. If, on the other hand, the kind of intellectual property which we're more familiar with applied, the time-limited property of copyright, then Verdi would have enjoyed a copyright in the song for a limited number of years from the time of the first performance. It might have been for, say, 25 years, it might have been for his own lifetime and a certain number of years thereafter, but it would ultimately have expired. Once the copyright had expired, it would then in fact become part of the public domain and freely accessible to anyone who wished to make use of it. The third possibility is the one which in fact did apply, because there was no intellectual property in Italy at the time when Verdi composed his opera. That is that as soon as he published the song by having a public performance in an opera house, it became freely available for anyone who wanted to use it, to develop it, to amend it, to perform it. Now, that in fact was the case, but it did not stop Verdi from making a considerable amount of money out of Rigoletto as of his other operas. That's because he was famous as the creator of the song, he was able to play upon that, and many people would willingly pay a premium to hear the song and other songs in the great opera performed by his own company or by people that he gave official approval to. And so this suggests that in fact, given this real-life case, there's no need to have that kind of intellectual property to encourage artistic creativity at this time. I hope you really enjoyed this. Click on one of these things here to watch more and learn more.
All right, so yeah, when we look at intellectual property versus private property, the government treats it a little bit differently. So private property is perpetual. All right, and that means that the ownership stays in your hands as long as you pay whatever taxes on it. So like my house, for instance, If I were to pass away, it would go on to my wife. If my wife were to pass away, it would go on to our hypothetical kids. And it would stay in that family until they decided to sell it. All right, same thing with like a car, right? If you own a car, that's yours for as long as you want it. But with intellectual property, it's a little bit different. It's got a time limit on it. And so if you look at like older Michael Jackson songs, their time has run out and they're public domain now. And that's why you hear so many modern musicians making Michael Jackson remixes. But whereas you might not hear those same remixes of his newer songs, the ones that he made more recent to his death, those are still private property to his family. Same thing with Daraprim and like EpiPen. So there's patents on both of them, and so no one can reproduce these until patents run out. I know that Daraprim's got another 2 or 3 years or so, but once that patent runs out, you'll start to see a great value version of it at Walmart. You'll start to see an up and up version of it at Target. And so these patents will run out. A couple other things with free market economy. Again, this profit motive is what drives us to innovate, right? Chick-fil-A doesn't want to lose out on any business, so they're trying to think of whatever ways they can to keep people in that line ordering their food. All right, and finally, is an open opportunity to the marketplace, right? We can't exclude people based on gender or race or ethnicity or anything like that, because that would, of course, be morally wrong, and also, be a detriment to our economy as well. And that's part of the reason why the South is still kind of developmentally behind the North today, is that during slavery, of course there's a million moral issues that go along with it, but there's also the economic issues of denying half of your population the right to own a home, or to choose their own clothes, or to work how they want to work. All right, so all of these things go against free market principles and have kind of developmentally slowed down the South compared to the North. All right, last thing I want to look at is, and we mentioned some of this earlier, a little bit as well, is about how important private property is to a free market economy. So first off is it creates this responsibility, right? Think about your car versus the bus that you would ride to and from school, right? So chances are you're going to treat that car a lot nicer than you're going to treat the bus, because you've got to live with it, right? You've got to live in whatever mess you create. Additionally, it leads to investments, right? If you have that car and you put new tires on it, then when you go to sell that car, you should get a little bit more money in return. And so you don't have that same kind of investment with public property, right? If you leave a bowl of cereal on your counter at home, well, when you get back from work or school, it's still there, it just smells worse. But if you leave that same bowl of cereal on a counter at school, chances are it's going to disappear before you come back the next day. All right, so you don't have that same incentive to invest in public property because you don't directly benefit from it. That doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do, but that's why people leave a mess behind. But all right, so we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a second. You can go and switch over to the Google Meet. See you guys soon. Thank you.